Good morning and welcome back to Super Mania, the show where we talk about all things neurodiversity and mental health. We are very, very excited to be back for our third season, and I cannot wait to welcome today's guest. This is somebody that I follow, that I think the world of, and that is really working to help the world understand neurodiversity better, especially from a child's point of view, which I absolutely love. So let's go ahead and bring on Dr. Jess Norris.
So
Welcome.
happy to be here. Hi, thank you so much for the invitation. I am
Absolutely.
thrilled, so excited. And I just want to let you know that that theme song is actually the theme song that plays every time I walk into a room. So
Oh,
I
I
do.
love it. the superhero theme. I got to tell you, that's kind of what I hear too. So yeah, it's just general theme music for all of us neurodiverse folks. And I do like to start off every season with talking very briefly about terminology. So you will hear neurodivergent, neurodiverse, things like that. And I want to just clarify that that's all just different terminology for essentially the same thing. There's just different preferred terminology. At one point, they kind of had different definitions, but now they've kind of merged together. So
Yeah. And I think in a sense that's a good thing that we do that, because we can't get while language matters and words matter,
yes.
you can get too tied up in nomenclature, especially when you are bringing this out to the masses. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So just to be very clear to everybody, and neurodiverse is also a very exciting topic. So I love neurodiversity, and all that means is that your brain processes information in a medically different way. So in other words, everybody thinks differently, right?
Yeah.
But neurodiversity is when there's an actual medically visible difference. So, for instance, with ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, which is one of my favorites, you know that, Jess. I love it so much that I married it.
Love it.
And I do. I love it. I love autism so much that I married it. And then like, but even into things like epilepsy, bipolar, gender dysphoria, a lot of people don't know that that is a medically visible
That's correct.
diagnosis. Now, not everybody who identifies as transgender has medically diagnosed gender dysphoria. So there are different types of gender dysphoria, but there is an actual medical version of gender dysphoria. So there you go.
Yep.
Lesson of the day.
And then there's the question. There are certain types of conditions that you're not necessarily born with, but you adapt as you
Yes.
age. One of them, Alzheimer's, and one that I have is multiple sclerosis.
That's
and
right.
So that is something that you can see on a brain. You can see that there are spots on the brain.
Traumatic brain injuries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we can't just limit the definition to genetically to genetic disorders.
Not at all.
It's important to realize. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so thank you for talking about that, because that's one myth. So a lot of people think, oh, it's something that you're born with. No, you can develop neurodiversity, and even things that are genetic don't always show up early in life, right? Sometimes things come out later. For instance, bipolar disorder, which does have a genetic component, not 100%, but there is a genetic component to it. That can come out, in fact, it actually does come out later in life. It typically is onset by either puberty or a little bit later in your teenage years. For me, it was puberty. That's it's like, and voila, bipolar. And a lot of times neurodiversities like autoimmune disorders and some other medical conditions come in multiples, right? So a lot of people have more than one diagnosis, which shocks a lot of people, but it's very common. They'll be like, oh, well, you can't be ADHD and have autism. Yes, you can. Those are absolutely compatible. Now, there are some that are not compatible, but a lot of times people have more than one. So just to identify, I have multiples, and the two that I talk about the most are my OCD, which can be different for everybody. It's not the exact same, right? And also my bipolar 1. So if you would like to identify, feel free.
Yes. So I have been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was diagnosed in 2012, just after the birth of my son, Stephen. And that makes Stephen, well, he's 11, he'll be 12 this year. I suspect that I had symptoms in college, but according to my neurologist, I could not have been diagnosed any sooner with the existing technology.
Right. Right.
But now looking back on it, the clues were there. What's also interesting is that while it is not necessarily a straight genetic disorder, there is a genetic predisposition to MS. And so my mother has MS and many of her siblings have MS. And so, it is thought that there's a virus that, you're exposed to. And if you have the genetic predisposition for it, turns a switch on and now you have MS. I've really simplified that, but in layman's terms, that's what happens. It's actually a very complex mechanism that we don't fully understand.
Right.
Now, my son is autistic. We use the term, the medical community is using the term high functioning.
Which there's a lot of
we're backing away from that, and with good reason. In the past, it was known as Asperger's, also backing away from that for good reason. And I've really paid attention because I stayed home with Stephen for a number of years as a stay-at-home mom, work from home mom, and I've really observed him, really got to witness his evolution, his journey, and noticed that he's had a lot of the same behaviors that I had as a child. Maybe not all of them, and so I highly suspect that I too am on the spectrum.
On the spectrum,
MS, it will be very difficult. It's very difficult for adults to be, or for individuals to be diagnosed as autistic later in life.
Yes, it is. And yet it's becoming more common. And a lot of people don't realize that. I'm talking to more and more adults with diagnosis. My husband was not diagnosed till he was an adult, which is so funny because they really should have known. And his mother and I have an ongoing joke about that. Like really, you didn't catch this, but
how did you not know?
Yeah, how did you not realize? Like, well, it's just my kid. I don't know. That's just what he was doing. Right. So, and I do want to again talk about language. So a lot of people will say, I have autism to I am autistic, vice versa. Yes. And again, this is just personal preference. There isn't really a right or wrong at this point. I'm sure at some point there will be. And I do like that you let's talk about the myth of high functioning, because this is not just applying to autism. This applies to ADHD. This applies to MS. This applies to bipolar. This applies to everything. There's kind of a scale. And the problem, and my favorite comedian, Hannah Gadsby, did a whole routine, who is on the spectrum, did a whole routine about why you shouldn't call somebody high functioning. And it's so funny because her whole joke is, you think that implies that I function highly, and I do not, but it's not my fault. And I do not, but it's not my fault.
It depends on how much coffee I've had. If I've
had
coffee,
and I love the joke. It's her delivery is spectacular. But she really does talk about how, but it's not her, it's how other people perceive. So yeah, it's not that she's not capable. People just are like, well, no, but if you don't do it this exact way, well, I can't do it that exact way. No. And so that's the problem with that, is what you're really saying is
it's these expectations that society puts upon people
that are insane. They're clinically insane. Like, that's like asking a fish to be a good dog. You can't, it's not going to work.
You're going to need you to go ahead and master fishness and be a dog.
Yeah, I just need you to not be a fish anymore. I just need you to be a dog. That's what I need you to do.
And I see that society is trying. They're trying, right? As we grow this awareness about neurodivergent conditions, about neurodiversity, we as a society are starting to understand that maybe these things are not really attainable for a lot of people.
Right.
I mean, we see that even for the everyman, and mental health is paramount now. At my job, I have, I'm not even kidding you, 12 emails in my inbox encouraging us to go to take advantage of the mental health that,
Which is good.
providers that they have mental health programs, unprecedented. Right?
Yeah, which is wonderful. I love that.
I've never had a company, right? But it speaks to the volume. It speaks to
Yes.
the problems, the volume of the problem within
Yes.
society.
And it's really interesting. So I want to kind of hit on a few. So what we're discussing right now is society's request for what is called masking. So that's, instead of doing what's natural for my brain and my behavior, I'm going to do what makes you happy. Now, there are certain behaviors that need to be curbed for safety, things like that, right? So it's, for instance, I'm going to use myself as an example here. One of the things that's very common that I do have to deal with for people with especially bipolar 1 is that when I am manic, I will go on shopping sprees. That is a detrimental behavior. That is not a safe behavior. Now, I'm not unsafe, like I'm going to go around stabbing people, but unsafe as in not good for myself, right? So I need to curb that. That's something that I need to do for safety and well-being. There are other things that sometimes do involve physical behaviors and all that. Those things do need to be worked on. That's not masking. What we're talking about is, well, there's only one right way to be on a Zoom meeting, or there's only one right way to say this or be in a relationship. And we're going to get to that in a minute. I have to circle back to that. That's its own little topic to unpack. But we're talking about masking. So masking is very unhealthy. So Psychology Today did a whole thing about, and there's been other publications like with Harvard and all that, about how unhealthy it is for the brain to mask. When it's not allowed to work in a way that's natural for it, it becomes less productive, less healthy. Your body actually starts suffering, and it's really bad for you. It's not good. I mean, you have a son who's on the spectrum, so to speak. So what are some things that you've seen that are society's expectations?
This is great. I'm glad you're diving into this. I will give you a great example, because I have always given him the opportunity to be himself. I'll suggest behaviors that, as a parent, you have to suggest behaviors that you think are best for your child, that you think are best for him to grow up to be a functioning adult. Now, when we say functioning adult, that's okay. But it's important. You still have to, as a parent, you still have to guide your child to do the right thing.
Right.
And so I'll give you a great example. He wrote, so he's in again, he's in middle school now. He's chosen his elective. He's in a creative writing class. And for those of you who do follow my posts, Stephen he hyper focuses on two things in life: cars and technology, specifically iPhone versus Android, Mac, Apple Mac technology, all of it. And so I thought, by taking this creative writing class, he would write poems called Ode to an iPhone. And instead, he wrote this really amazing and funny piece that I read, and my mother read. And so we told him, I said, well, listen, we are really amazed at this piece that you wrote, this poem, which is difficult for anybody, spectrum or no. That's not an easy task to kind of dive into. It's his first time writing a poem. It was really good. And we complimented him, and he said, yeah, I know.
Which I love. And I want to hit on the importance of that. So people will often mistake that behavior as egomania or rudeness or inflated ego. And it's not. So people who have autism or are autistic, or whatever their preferred language is, they simply hit on facts. So if you've said something that they know is fact, they'll disagree with you because, well, yeah, that's what it is. Right. There's also a tendency to, if they know the best way, to get very frustrated with people that won't also do things the best way. It's very hard for them. And believe me, they have the logic to back it up. Trust me, they will go down the rabbit hole with you as to why they're right. I tell people all the time, I love autism so much that I married it. So it's something I'm very familiar with, and that I really enjoy. So it's often mistaken, right? So people would say, well, don't say that, Stephen. That's not humble. That's not the right way to handle this, but that's
Right.
his natural response. And really, what's wrong with knowing that you're good?
Well, I'll follow that up. So, we have told him, I said, well, people, just so you know, Stephen, people, when people pay you a compliment, it's polite. People expect, at first we were like, hey, it's polite, but we changed that to people expect you to say thank you. Oh, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
There
And
you go.
there was no sincerity to that. And to him, it's like, well, it's good. Of course it's good. That's why I elected to show it to you.
Yeah. Very practical. Just
It is like, what it just does not compute. And so, I still walk him through the expectations of other people. And to him, it does not compute. I'll give you another example. So every morning I drop him off at school. And there's for those of you who are familiar with the car rider line at school, there are people that get there at 8:00 for an 8:45 entrance of the kids because they want to be first in line. I don't get it. But one morning I happened to be early enough that I was able to kind of get over to the car rider line, so towards the front, get to the area, and we're in the area where you're allowed to, get your child to the door. And it was 8:44, and he's sitting there. And I said, well, you can go if you want. We're in the right section. No, it's not 8:45 yet.
oh my God, I love that.
Other children that are going to the door. He goes, they do not want us standing by the door. I will wait I will exit the car at 8:45.
Yep.
I go, but I think it's okay, 8:44. No. And I go, well, okay, but you are holding up the car rider line by not getting out of the car.
Does not care.
Don't care.
Nope.
So I start, explaining, there you can wiggle that minute. And then he's like, and then the clock turned to 8:45. Got to go by.
Yeah. Yeah. When I read that one, I cracked up like out loud, just was floored, cracking up, because the very specific. So let's talk about why this is an awesome thing, right? So then you have people, and I talk about Mervyn a lot. So Mervyn Kennedy McFoy is my top advisor for a technology that I built. I've worked with him on other projects, things like that, and he will come back to you with very specific feedback, very guided feedback, and he will understand what the project really needs past what you asked for. And instead of sending you just bullet point notes, we'll send you a whole detailed description with graphs and all this thing, and the information will send you down a much better path, a stronger path, and it makes you stronger as an organization. And the same thing works in personal relationships. Excuse me, sorry. The same thing works in personal relationships too, right? So they'll come back to you and have all this feedback about a problem or all this communication. Other people with different diagnoses will have different gifts that they can do. And so like a lot of people will have emotional intelligence that other people don't have. They'll clue to different facial features that other people would not notice. And one thing that's very common that people mistake is not looking at you as being dishonest, and that's not correct. People with ADHD, people with autism, people with multiple diagnoses will not look you in the eye, but it's because it actually helps them to focus on what you're saying. They're actually trying to listen harder, and to focus better. So that's another myth that just drives me up the wall. And it's this idea too that everybody's the same, right? So my husband and your son share a diagnosis, but they have different skills, different manifestations. Other people that I know with bipolar disorder have completely different manifestations. Different OCD folks have different manifestations. Like I'm not Jack Nicholson from As Good as It Gets, like counting the number of times that I flip the light switch and things like that. But sure. I am a germaphobe, and I do sort my M&Ms into colors. And I do have to eat my food in even numbers of bites. Mm-hmm. Like there's different manifestations of different things. So it's not the same experience. So you can't say, well, my cousin has that diagnosis too, and they behave differently, so you're doing it wrong.
Right.
No.
So to give you some kind of context, I'm a Gen X, and I was trained to make eye contact. And I still I'm in my 40s, I still don't like doing it. But to really focus on what in fact, I'm so focused on making eye contact with somebody that I often don't hear, really take in what they're saying. And so now that I'm more aware of my brain, my mind, how I work, now I will actually lean in to listen with my ear facing the individual who's speaking to me, and that's when I really absorb what they're saying. And so I've kind of started reverting back to my natural being, if you will. Stephen does the same thing, something very similar. He doesn't put his ear out, but he will look in a different direction. He will look down if he's listening. And so there are certain things, and I want to kind of piggyback back to something else that you said. One thing that a lot of neurotypical individuals will say, not a lot, but a select few will say, my son's autistic. Oh, well, my cousin's brother's aunt's boyfriend is autistic and he's nothing like him.
Yeah.
But, we hear it, we still hear it. We're hearing it less and less as the awareness grows. And I think that's what's important.
But you're right. It is extremely important. And I tell people, well, so several people from Texas, right? Are they all the same person? No. There you go. Yeah. Everybody's different experience, different manifestations, different body chemistries. It's all different, right?
And different environments that they've grown up in. I mean, it's nature and nurture. It's combination.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But this has been the most interesting thing. So the thing that I've heard as the argument is, well, we can't just have everyone behaving differently. There has to be a standard.
No.
First of all, no, there doesn't. Second of all, and here's why. So here's what I tell people. So I grew up Southern, right? I talk about this a lot, from a true Southern family, and all the right ways, like all the good things about being Southern. And we accommodate everyone. I know all of my friends' dietary preferences, language preferences, who they want to talk with, where they want to sit in a room, everything. It's all up here. And it's not even that hard. No. And so it's not that difficult as you're meeting people and as you get to know people. I know all my clients, preferences in terms of how to communicate, my candidates. Just do that. Just be a human with people, work with them in a way that's comfortable for them. Now, sometimes you got to meet halfway, right? Sometimes that's just practical. You just have to meet halfway. Right. But it's a myth that everyone needs to behave the same way. In fact, it's actually counterproductive, and it stunts progress for that to happen, right? So you want to embrace different. And I also tell people too, if you stunted every neurodiverse person, we would have no advancements in human history, because every single person to a human that you can in any way, shape, or form track their behavior, that has created any sort of advancement is neurodiverse, like guarantee you. Even if they didn't have the diagnosis, you can see the symptoms of this, and this. And so they're what we would call non-linear, right? So undiagnosed neurodiverse person. And so you don't want to stifle this. You don't want to. You want to just let it run and do its thing and steer into it. So I want to ask you.
It'll come in. You'll come into amazing things. You'll witness amazing things if you let it run.
Yeah. And the last topic I want to kind of hit on. So there's this idea that there's a correct way to have friendships and a correct way to be in a romantic relationship. And if you don't behave these exact ways, then you are failing. And I've come to realize, as a neurodiverse person who's in a relationship with another neurodiverse person, and as somebody who works with this stuff all the time and talks to people literally around the world about these types of topics, is that there are more relationships ending because of lack of understanding of your partner's diversity than I think just about anything else. And I wonder how many relationships, how many marriages, how many friendships, how many working relationships could have been saved if the people just understood, oh, you communicate that way because of your diversity. And so like ADHD people, sometimes, not all, will just give you like just flow a river of information, and that can be a lot for people. And they'll be, and some, not all, can be very kind of emotionally inclined in conversations. You'll see a lot of energy in their conversations. They'll seem very hyped up over things that seem very small, but it's just that that's how they process the information. People on the spectrum sometimes will give you like, no, this is just how it is. This is fact. And this is, and they won't understand that there's another perspective, maybe because they see it as, well, factually, this, and this. I didn't mean it that way. So why did you take it that way? That's on you. Well, you just have to learn how to communicate with that, right? It's not that.
And I 100% agree. And when you communicate your needs, that is the core definition of what is really the importance of any relationship. And I'm talking marriage, I'm talking at work, I'm talking with your neurodivergent, and you have needs, you have to communicate them. That is the very core of self-advocacy. And if you are given the freedom to self-advocate, and you know how to self-advocate, then you have the ability to really become your most productive. And I think that's what's really lacking, is giving those neurodivergent individuals the freedom to communicate their needs. That's what it is. And they have to allow themselves, people have to allow them as much as they need to allow themselves. And people our age, people even a bit younger, millennials, I think that are neurodivergent, I think they grew up in an environment where they were not necessarily allowed to do that.
Oh, very true.
That's what needs to change.
100%. I could not agree more. You have to, and people go, well, why don't they just speak up anyway? First of all, trust me, they are, and you're not listening. You're not hearing it. And I don't mean it like you don't hear what they say. Obviously you hear their words, right? But you're not reading it as, okay, this person has a need. And that's because the automatic default of our brains is to be very me focused, but we have to train our brains to be we focused, right? The community. We've decided to be a society. That means that we have to rely on each other. We have to work with each other. We have to communicate. And so you have to work with your brain, which is very easy to do, by the way, to teach it to be a we, and to hear what people are really saying to you and accept the different forms of communication. So some solutions, because I like to offer solutions, right? So some solutions for this that I want to throw out, and I want to get your opinions, are number one is when somebody says something to you and you could tell that this is very meaningful to them, if you disagree, do not just shut it down as bad information. Or if you're not understanding why they're so upset about this very little thing, stop and say, tell me more about this. Can you elaborate so that I can understand better? And listen to them, come to understand, because sometimes you'll realize that you just needed to hear different words and now you do understand them. That they were telling you as best they could, but you needed the words differently. Know how you need to communicate. So if there's you need to be self-aware and know how you need things communicated to you. So I like to hear information in a linear kind of structure, or in a completely abstract, which I realize is very strange that both of those things work, but it's one of those two formats. Anything in between just does not function for me. So I have to ask people, could you tell me like this? Can you do it like this so that I can hear you properly? And then another thing is educate yourself. I tell people every day, not every day, every week, learn a new diversity. Get online, do research, connect to humans with that diversity so that you can observe them, see what's going on in their world. And you will be surprised how that will open up your mind and your heart and everything else about you, and will grow you professionally and as a human being. Jess, what are some of your tips as we wrap up?
I agree with you 100%. And I think that's a wonderful idea with with learning a new diversity. I think that there needs to be more, improve awareness. And one thing that I can recommend is join a community, which kind of goes against, it goes against what a lot of people think is, I can do this myself, right? It's just easier. I don't have to interact with people. But I have found that if neurodivergent individuals find their tribe and, communicate with others at their own pace in an environment where they feel comfortable, where they can just sit back and observe, or they can communicate as needed. They will thrive. They are more likely to advocate for themselves outside of that community. And so that's something that I've put together on LinkedIn. I put together a community called, we'll plug, Amazing Brain Club.
Which I love.
Thank you. I have generated, we've got about just over 115 members at the moment. It's grown pretty quickly. And I post things, but other people post things. And there is often, kind of camaraderie that I'm trying to grow, community. And, I'm not forcing friendships. We're just talking.
No, just getting to know.
It's support to give you the courage and the permission, give yourself permission to self-advocate, to communicate your needs. And that's, and I find that I'm lucky where I work. I communicate my needs. I was very upfront about my needs, and I communicate my needs. I don't specifically talk about my diagnosis. This is what I need to be the most productive for you. Okay.
And I want to hit on that as our final point. Accommodations, folks. You are entitled to them legally. They are very easy to get. And you can tell even if your employer is kind of digging their heels in, you can get them to work with you. If you want information, we're at the end of the show, but if you want information on that, please reach out to me directly. I'm very happy to help. Join a community. Join the octopusmovement.org is amazing. They're also on LinkedIn and Facebook. Jess's group is fantastic. Also, her posts about Stephen are hilarious and uplifting. Absolutely love it. Definitely follow her. If you need help with resources, anything like that, please connect with me. I am always here to support my community. And with that, connect to us both on LinkedIn. Same time, same place next week, different topic. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Kat.